So, hello everybody. I'm glad to welcome everybody. I speak from Kyiv, from Ukraine. Today we will be speaking about rare and valuable books in the collections of the largest library of Ukraine, the Vernadsky National Library of Ukraine, which is among the 20 largest libraries in the world. So, this is the building of our library, its main building. We'll be speaking about book monuments and their collections. We have this very special term, book monuments. It has spread in this post-Soviet space in the mid-1980s, and it means that book is not only rare in the sense of the small number of copies that exist in the world, but also that such book has the value of a historical monument. For example, this can be the first or lifetime editions of classical literature. First of all, speaking about Ukrainian literature, but also special monuments of history, of science, of art. Right now you can see one of the 5 copies of the first 1840s edition of Taras Shevchenko's Kobzar. Only 5 copies were preserved in Ukraine, so this book is both rare and extremely valuable for Ukraine. It is a book that is of value for the whole state. Besides, there are some book monuments that include masterpieces of printing and book arts, book of unusual formats. Besides, this can be books published in the turning point years of history, so they reveal the history to us. When you speak about book monuments, this can also be copies with autographs, books printed on some unusual materials, and also books with artistic book plates of prominent personalities, or interesting marginal notes on the pages. Book itself might not be interesting, but as it has some notes by a famous person, such notes may make book a book monument. Sometimes a book previously owned by an outstanding person or historical institution, or maybe part of a memorial collection, it also can make a book monument. Besides, sometimes we can have valuable collections based on various characteristics, the age of books, the origin of publications, or according even to the font of edition. For example, a collection of editions in Cyrillic or Old Slavonic font. Right now I would like to show you the first printed book in Ukraine, Lviv Apostle. It was printed in Old Slavonic font. It was printed by Ivan Fedorov in Lviv. So it is in fact really the first printed book printed in territory of modern Ukraine. Of course, it is of high value for Ukraine, and it is an example, a copy of this book that is kept in our library. Sometimes speak about book monuments that are identified according to their format. Look here, these are miniature books kept in the National Library of Ukraine. There's also an English language dictionary published in 1900 in New York, and it has a special case from leather made by our designers. Its size is measured in millimeters. It's so small. So the National Library of Ukraine, which has name of Vernadsky, it's founded in a long time ago, in 1917, by the order of Ukrainian hetman But there were other people who supported this decision, and later on it got new name. It was called All People's Name Library of Ukraine in order to avoid word national, because communists didn't like it. Later on, there were also other names for the library. From those distant time and until today, the library is subordinate to the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, and it is not only a scientific institution, which includes several scientific institutes, for example, institutes of manuscripts, book studies, library studies, archival studies, Institute of Information Technologies, but also departments of national and scientific bibliography, etc. Library is also really the national library of the country, because it bears the corresponding functions. Among them, in particular, preservation of the documentary heritage of the nation, creation of an insurance fund of socially significant primary sources of information, maintenance of national bibliography, participation in the formation and implementation of national information policy, scientific and methodological management of the library industry, representation of the country in relevant international associations. One of the institution's priorities, of course, is gathering and creating bibliography of Ukrainian literature. As early as the 1920s, discussions about the Ukrainian bibliographic repertoire were concluded. So what are Ukrainian books? What are books of Ukrainian heritage? Of course, these discussions took off after Ukraine's independence in the 1990s, because during the Soviet times, this topic wasn't good for discussion, as you understand. Several catalogues were created for Ukrainian books. For example, the Ukrainian-language book catalog is a list of books printed since 1798, when the first publication of Aeneid by Ivan Kotlяревsky in Ukrainian was printed, and until 1916, when state registration of books in the Soviet Union was launched. Actually, this is the book that lists books until 1916, but the catalog itself includes books until 1923. It's important to note that during that time, many books were printed in Old Ukrainian language. It's not the language used nowadays, but still it is different from Church Slavonic. It's Old Ukrainian language, and lots of Ukrainian books, mainly works of domestic thinkers and writers, were published in it. In particular, let me show you book Peace with God to the Man by Giselle Innocent. And another book is A Key to the Common Sense by loanikiy Halyatovskyi, published in 1665. Another book is Spiritual Sword by Lazar Baranovich. Its copy, kept in the library, comes from Lazar Baranovich private library, and it has lots of notes on margins, which makes them even more valuable. So Lazar Baranovich kept on editing his books during his life. These are extremely valuable copies of these books. In general, Ukrainian book history is more than 100 years. So one of the books was published in 1037. And it is stated that Yaroslav Mudry has founded the first library in Kievan Rus in that year. Of course, we have lots of books that were written, not printed. And we have catalogs of manuscript books. We have a catalog of books starting since the 11th century, and we are preparing to publish the catalog of manuscripts for the 17th century. Here you can see a photo of the Peresopnitsa Gospel, which was created in the middle of the 16th century. It's written on the parchment, and it has very exquisite style. It is the book that is used by the Ukrainian presidents to swear into their post. This photo shows us that we had lots of honorary guests, and one of them was the US ambassador to Ukraine. So, of course, the book is well kept, it is stored under guard, but we bring it to show to some honorary guests, like John Taft and his wife, who were able to take a look at the Peresopnitsa Gospel at the library. As you can see, this book is quite big, and the way the ambassador holds his hand, it is because he was told that there is some positive energy coming from this book, and he's trying to feel it. It was pictured here. So let me also add that besides from manuscript books catalogs, we have quite a big collection of old prints, and one of the first catalogs was published in the 1980s in Lviv, and we believe that books printed in Ukraine since 1574 belong to the Ukrainian heritage, and we believe that all books until 1800 are old prints. So this catalog enlists those books, but we have found more books of that time, and this catalog can be amended. No doubt, except for this catalog, there were other catalogs, for example, catalog of books prepared by Stepan Petrov. As for books published in Ukraine in 1861, 1917, using the so-called civilian type, which was a particular approach used in the Tsarist Russia in order to publish non-religious literature. You see, religious literature was published in Church Slavonic, but simplified civilian type, civilian font was used for any other type of literature. And so the catalog for such books was prepared. Right now, let me show you one of the volumes of a 11-book collection of catalogs, which lists hundreds of thousands of books published in Ukraine at that time. Let me also add that definitely Ukrainian libraries, including the Vernadsky National Library of Ukraine, they have collections not only of Ukrainian books, but also books and documents of other nations in other languages. At the moment, we have over 16 million of various items that we store. All of that is our common heritage. So we are developing the National Register for the Book Monuments, which is supposed to be part of the National Heritage Register. We provided to store information as for all kinds of monuments stored in Ukraine, dependless of where they were created or by whom they were created. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have any unified register for rare or valuable books. So let's come back to the topic of gathering books and collections. Collection of funds, including retrospective ones, started from the very beginning of the library. At some point, the library had no storage, but there were already people working in order to save the heritage of the past. In this way, the library was able to get the collection of St. Sophia Cathedral. Right now you can see it on the picture. So its library, in particular library of Yaroslav the Wise, unfortunately, that library of the 11th century, it disappeared, but some parts of the cathedral's collection are kept in our library. Also, we got the library from Kyiv Lavra, one of the biggest monasteries in Ukraine, in Kyiv. Lavra means actually men's monastery. And this picture was taken by me. I wanted to share it with you. And the monastery had a huge library, but most of it was destroyed by fire back in the 19th century, but everything else was given to the National Library. Also, we have funds that come from St. Michael's Golden Dome Cathedral, Vernadskyi, Mikilsky, and other cathedrals. We also received the storage from the Kyiv Theological Academy that you can see in this picture. It existed in the 19th and in the early 20th century. Before it was Kyiv Academy, and currently Kyiv Academy is also a functioning university in these buildings. So we got over 100,000 items from their collection. We also received the collection from the one of the biggest Ukrainian universities, St. Vladimir University, which is called Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv as of today. We should also add that the library was actually created before the university itself, in the Lyceum that was later created as this university. So this library includes Library of the Last Polish King Stanislav August Poniatowski, also collections of the Kremenets Jesuit Collegium, and so on. We are trying to develop some tour guides as for these historical collections. So, in fact, we developed already the first issue of the Historical Collections Directory of our library. We are trying to reveal the history of the books, and the first book is about books that come from St. Vladimir University, but also from other educational institutions. So, let me also note that we're also preparing our scientific publications, both in print, but also as e-books. They are available for free on our website for anybody. Of course, currently we are having some power cuts in Ukraine, and there are some issues with accessing our website, and one of our servers was actually destroyed because of that, because of these blackouts. Still, our IT guys are trying to fix it. Like also to say that a book with the Superx libraries of the last Polish king Stanislaus Augustus Poniatowski. So most of books from this collection have leather covers and a seal by the king. It wasn't for the Russian aggression back in 2022 prevented us from having joint exposition together with our Polish colleagues of these books, and currently this cooperation is postponed. So the library storage was replenished all the time, and valuable collections of other libraries were provided to our library, including the library from Zhytomyr, which included a big number of book monuments. So the general trend was as follows. Other libraries were closed, but their items were transferred to our library for storage. It is important to say that our library has been working on developing new collections and new departments all the time. In particular, we've been working on collecting manuscripts and old prints. In this way, the first departments were created for old prints, for manuscripts, for notes, musical notes, for maps, for images, for Oriental books, books coming from the East, and we had all the relevant departments. Quite often we had single-piece funds. Let me speak about the department of old prints. You can see a picture from it. So this is the way how we present old prints, and we also provide some excursions to our visitors. These are actually pieces of furniture that come from other museums, Shevchenko Museum and from the King's collection. So there is a collection of incunabula, which are actually first prints, the very first books that were printed in Europe back in the 16th century and in the 15th century. Here I would like to show you a page of the 1476 edition of Aristotle's De Anima Libus. Most of this book was printed on paper, but some of its copies were printed on parchment. These are very rare, and our library owns one. In fact, we have only 525 copies of incunabula, and this is the biggest collection in Ukraine. Of course, there are many more such books in Europe, and Germany was the first country for printing. So we have lots of collections for Cyrillic old prints in Latin script, but also paleotypes. So these are books that were printed in the 16th century. We have also collections from the Eldon Press from Venice, the French Etienne firm, the Dutch Elsevier firm. These are the greatest publishing houses. In 1929, a subdivision of rarities was created, and it is currently a collection of rare editions, where the best world editions of classics, but also masterpieces of calligraphy and book art are collected. but there are also books prohibited by censorship, prohibited by the authorities, which makes them extremely rare, or some of them were not published in huge numbers. There is also department for rare collections in our library, which is crucial to store the most valuable books, including books that come from monasteries, and this department has single pieces funds of foreign editions of the 19th and early 20th century. Of course, such prints are also part of other collections, but most such books are kept in a particular department. Unfortunately, we don't have many books printed in the US, and in general, the stock of the English language editions is just several thousand items. Mostly we have books in Polish, French, and German, which is quite relevant to the history of Ukraine. You see, these languages were more widespread and in the 19th century. That's why we have more books in these languages. There are catalogs for collections in the library, both traditional card-based and modern electronic directories. We started to develop the catalog in 1994. As for modern publications, but speaking about retrospective editions, it's hard for us because we have huge numbers of old books, but various departments are working hard in order to catalog their funds. Besides, we are working to prepare printed catalogs. First of all, people are interested in incunabula, in teletypes, in old font prints, also books with original autographs of authors and so on, also ex libris catalogs. The last catalog that was printed is catalog of Gospels printed in Vilnius back in the 16th, 17th century. It's a fundamental catalog, which is about just several Gospel editions, in fact. I had the honor to work in the Department of Old Prints, and it allowed me to have the relevant experience and to realize that book studies and bibliography are at the stage of development when really all kinds of research, global research, and empirical material, they necessitated to have the most theoretical knowledge. That's why I suggested to call all the work with the old prints and book monuments, and I suggested to introduce a new scientific discipline, which would be called book studies. But in general, I would like to introduce a new term, which is like book monument studies, because we are dealing with book monuments and we need a scientific discipline to work with them. So let's call it book monument studies. And I really believe that working with rare, valuable books in the library is very different from working with some standard books. And besides of the mentioned departments, we have many other departments. One of them is for foreign Ukrainian publication, for music notes. Let's speak about foreign Ukrainian literature. This department was created on the basis of a special storage, which was like a censorship-controlled storage. So some books were banned due to the ideology, and it happened quite often that the whole number of books was destroyed because of ideological reasons, but one copy was kept for history, because in the Soviet Union many books were believed to be hostile. Also, books of capitalist countries, so to say, were also part of this special storage department. Today, of course, this department has completely different approach, and it contains mostly foreign publications of Ukrainian diaspora, which are very numerous because we have huge diaspora abroad. The department also stores the collections of the Ukraine-related publications, mostly in Ukrainian and in English from abroad. They also keep collections of the Ukrainian People's House from Toronto, the library of Yaroslav Bogdan Rudnitsky, and a collection of periodicals of Ukrainian diaspora, as well as an array of once banned literature, which was handed over in the 1990s by the Security Service of Ukraine. Let me show you at least one book, which is quite typical for the collection of the Security Service of Ukraine. It's a disguised print. Here you can see a cover for a book officially published, materials of the Communist Party meeting. Everything is real, even the first pages come from the officially published book, but in fact, inside this book includes a book by a person from Ukrainian diaspora that speaks different truth about Ukraine. A book that calls to fight against communism and for Ukraine's independence. I hope you understand what we are speaking about. So this is disguised print, and it is quite an example for the history of Ukrainian book and culture. So the department personnel currently are working on creating topical directories, and at least 3 such indexes have been published recently. One of them is about 125th anniversary of the mass migration of Ukrainians to Canada. Another is about the language and folk culture of Ukrainians in Canada, and an index of bibliographical sources of foreign Ukrainians. Also, the department workers are creating a database of articles from diaspora periodicals. It's quite difficult to understand what any particular magazine was about, so we need to index them in order to describe all the articles published in those periodicals. It would be a great resource when it is printed. The Department of Music Funds stores more than 225,000 sheet music editions and manuscripts. It is the largest in Ukraine and one of the largest in the world. The Department of Fine Arts has concentrated collections of posters, movie posters since the 1920s. You can actually learn the movie history using these posters. There are also postcards. There is a unique collection of engraved boards from which engravings in old prints were printed. During the 8 years of scientific activity of the Institute, whose activity is mainly based on disclosure of the funds of the departments, the employees prepared and printed 25 separate books, including a catalogue of copper and grain plates of the 17th century, monographs on the Ukrainian Scientific Institute of Bibliography, including the monograph prepared by me. There are also monographs on the library collections in the library of Kyiv about the libraries, private libraries of the important figures of the monastery. We have also monographs on the printing house of Berditchev Monastery and also collective monographs on the history of the book culture of Ukraine and the experience of research in historical and cultural funds. We have scientific catalogs of Ukrainian posters and movie posters, also for bookmarks, which are called ex libris. We have a catalog for musical Shevchenkiana, that is studies of Taras Shevchenko and his image in music. We also have the fundamental work of the whole department, because lots of composers were using Taras Shevchenko's poems in order to create music. We are going to reprint this catalog because it needs to be enlarged. This year we plan to publish a collective monograph on the attribution and examination of book monuments. We have lots of interesting material for that. Another monograph would be on the Baroque style in Ukrainian old prints. Also a catalog of a collection of European engraved portraits of the 16th-19th centuries, as well as a bibliographic index of the Ukrainian studies, works of the American librarian and bibliographer Edward Kucinets. It is clear that, in addition to printed editions, employees are constantly working on the creation and improvement of electronic resources, and not only electronic catalogs, but also other projects, for example, postcards. We have published a huge resource on the website, which is about postcards with the image of Kyiv at the beginning of the 20th century. Quite often, you can find lots of interesting buildings, historical buildings, that did not survive until today, but our catalog provides information about those buildings, the architects, and so on. Book monuments and historical collections that have been preserved for centuries, as well as modern fund of the National Library, are now again under threat. During the Second World War, the most valuable collections were taken to the city of Ufa, which is in Bashkiria in Russia. But today, it is Russia that attacked us, and we cannot evacuate again to Ufa. We were not ready to start any evacuation, and Kyiv was actually under attack, under bombardment every day since the first day of invasion. So we had no way to save our collections. We couldn't believe anything like that could repeat itself since the Second World War. There are multiple issues in the libraries on the post-Soviet space. First of all, we don't have enough storage. We need better book storages because we have many books, but not enough book storages. Several libraries were hit by the Russian aggression. First of all, those libraries in Kherson, Mykolaiv, Mariupol, and there was an explosion in the center of Kyiv at the corner of Volodymyrsky Street and Shevchenko Boulevard, which is actually historical center of the city, practically heart of the city. You see, the Kyiv National Museum was hit by that explosion, and right now we can see broken windows in our reading room, but also the adjacent museum, Hanenko Museum, was hit by that explosion. Of course, we were able to hide the most valuable items in the very first days of the war, but we cannot hide all the 16 million items that we store. And the war is still going on. Right now, we are hearing this presentation, but the air raid alert is on in Kyiv. But we need to work, we need to continue our work. Of course, Vernadsky National Library of Ukraine has other areas of activity, not only working with valuable books. We have some library departments that focus on everyday library activities, but we have also the Fund for Presidents of Ukraine, the Service for Information and Analytical Support of Authorities, the National Legal Library. Also, we have a huge electronic library that we call Ukrayinika. Right now we can see a screenshot from our website. So we have also repository, Everlib. We have electronic archives of outstanding Ukrainians, Mikhailo Hrushevsky, Shevchenko, electronic catalogs and databases, abstract database, Ukrainika Naukova, the full text periodic of Ukraine, but also websites of scientific periodicals published by our library, because we publish some scientific journals, and we would be delighted to publish your articles, by the way. So we have also bibliometrics of Ukrainian science. So please visit our website, nbuv.gov.ua, and I invite you to our resources. And after Ukraine's victory, that I believe in, I invite you to an excursion to Kyiv and to our library, to our Vernadskyi library. So thank you for your attention, and right now I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Koval'chuk. I'm happy to take some questions from the audience that you can pop into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I'm seeing some questions from Annie Fisher in the chat. Since there are so many, I'll just read them, and then Yvonne will translate for Dr. Koval'chuk. So first, she says, thank you, Dr. Koval'chuk, for devoting your time during war to talk to us. This was very meaningful and informative, and thank you to Ivan Dineko for the superb simultaneous interpreting. I want to echo those thanks. So Annie asks, what resources would help the NBUV preserve and protect its collections of rare and valuable books, both now during war and in the future?
Може зараз відповідати зразу, да?
So let me start my answer. So we lack many things, in fact, because of power cuts, because of blackouts. We have huge issue with our web server. One of them lost its functionality, and we are working hard to relaunch its operations. We need more computers in order to work with our electronic resources, because you see, computers, they get outdated quite soon, and we cannot buy stuff because all the funds of the state are used in order to fund the army, and it's understandable. We cannot expect additional funding from the state at the moment. So we are working hard in order to reveal our heritage to the world, and any kind of electronic equipment is very important for us. Of course, we will not speak about evacuation. We are sure that Kyiv will stand in this war, and we don't need any evacuation. We don't need any special boxes or transport. Not today. It's not relevant today. This is my answer.
Thank you. I'll ask another question that two members of the audience have posed. Annie Fisher asked this, and also Lisa Fagan Davis put it very well here. The world is so grateful to you for your courage, calm, and professionalism. How can the worldwide community of librarians help? I was just looking on the library website. Is there a way to donate funding, or are there other ways to donate?
Я не дуже обізнана в цій темі.
Sorry, I don't know much about this topic. You see, I'm into book studies, first of all. It's about accounting in some way. But as far as I know, we have at least some kind of a foreign currency account, but unfortunately, I don't know its details. But let me say that I am very grateful to the US government and to the US people because of that support that we are getting from you in Ukraine. We actually feel your support, and we are very grateful to you. These are not just words, we are actually grateful to you.
Thank you. I'll ask another question from Annie Fisher. If there was one of your own books, Dr. Koval'chuk, that was most important to be translated into English, which book would it be? She should suggest something that is in Cyrillic, and I'm sorry that I can't read it, but maybe Dr. Koval'chuk has another suggestion. Ivan, I'm sure.
Я не заперечую, але вони такі великі. Мені важко сказати, тому що...
Sorry, it's kind of a difficult question. In fact, yes, for sure, the Ukrainian Scientific Institute for Book Studies, yes, Annie Fisher helped me to publish an article about it, and in general, you can have an overview of its activities, but really, there are some questions, there are some issues that need additional explanation for the US readers, especially about Ukraine's history in the 1920s, 1930s. It's quite hard to understand why librarians, simple librarians, were repressed, were killed in the 1930s. It's a huge historical question, so I don't know if we can actually translate the whole book. I don't think so, actually. In fact, I write a lot. I use so many words that it's hard for translators to translate.
We have another question that's also in the Q&A box that I've been thinking about also. It's from Christine Jacobson. She says, thank you, Dr. Koval'chuk, for your presentation. It strikes me that one of the most powerful tools we have to combat Russia's narrative that Ukrainians are Russians can be found in library collections. Books and manuscripts prove how long Ukraine has had a separate linguistic, cultural, and political identity. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And also, I've been thinking about just how it feels for you right now to be doing the work to preserve your cultural heritage as book monuments. And I love that term. So if you want to share with our audience a little bit about those topics, we'd be grateful.
Ну, для мене це вже немає сумніву. Я вже так звикла за ці роки називати.
For sure, I have no doubt as of things that you have said about, yes, some books are really rare and valuable. Sometimes you need to explain that something is rare and valuable, but when we say book monument, it actually means that something is both rare and valuable. But I don't like the term book monument. Monument is about something monumental, but I really like Ukrainian equivalent for this word, which is impossible to translate. So not all books are book monuments, but it's hard to explain, yes.
And so what writers and thinkers would you recommend to librarians and curators who want to collect and preserve Ukrainian cultural heritage materials here outside of Ukraine, in the US or anywhere else in the world? Where should people focus, in your opinion?
Ну, є класики у нас, починаючи там 17-19
Of course, we have some classic figures like Taras Shevchenko, like Ivan Franko, like Nechu Levitsky, but speaking about some Soviet time writers and also writers of the 20th century, we don't know much about them. That's why those that were brilliant, those that represented some interesting scientific approaches, most of them were killed, and we were not able even to learn about their views. And at some point, purely Soviet literature was dominating. Those people were called writers, millionaires, but it meant that they were not that famous or rich, but their books were printed in huge volumes. But nobody cares about them nowadays. They mean nothing as of today. Recently, I have opened the website of our library, its section for cultural heritage, and I've seen that there are some books from the previous special storage, and some of those books are digitalized, are scanned, and right now you can read books and stories by Valerian Підмогильний, Микола Хвильовий, repressed Ukrainian writers. I really appreciate their poems, their books.
Well, we're now at 1 p.m. New York time and 8 p.m. in Kyiv. So that wraps up our discussion today. I want to thank you, Dr. Koval'chuk, for making time to present and share your knowledge and expertise and help this American and global audience to learn more about the magnificent collections at the National Library of Ukraine and your printed and other bookish cultural heritage. And Ivan Dineko, thank you so very much for your absolutely amazing work interpreting today. We could not have done this without you. I'm applauding you both from here in New York City and sending you lots of support, and we are really proud to be here supporting you from America. So thank you very much. And we stand with Ukraine, and we will be here to support you. And if people are interested in trying to understand more about how we can send support, that's a conversation that maybe we could pick up afterward over email. I'll put the BSA's email in the chat right now. So thank you once again, everyone. Good
Дякую,
afternoon.
я передам генеральному директору, да, дякую.
I'll pass your words to our Director General.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon, I hope. Bye.
Дякую, до побачення.